Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We're so happy to be presenting this webinar series for you, and hopefully you'll get a lot of good information out of it. I have got a couple of housekeeping slides to go over. There is live captioning available for this webinar and all of our future webinars in this series. Just click on CC at the bottom of the Zoom screen to turn the captioning on. You can also enlarge the captioning box by clicking on the upward arrow in the top right corner of it. So this is going to be a 40-minute session, and we are setting aside 20 minutes at the end for questions. If you should see a Q&A icon at the bottom of the Zoom window, that is where you should submit your questions for me. I believe we have disabled chat for a couple of reasons. I know one is that I'm just one and you are over 200 people, and so to keep up with all your questions and to get them all answered, the Q&A would just be one nice spot for me to go to. And also we found that the screen reading software just insist upon reading it out loud automatically without permission, really interrupting folks trying to listen in. So let's see. So yes, you can submit questions throughout the session. You don't have to wait till the end. And you should be able to see everybody's questions and hear and read the answers. There is a page that we've set up on the Access Text Wiki. The link is bit.ly/epub-atn. You will find resources and information on that page. And you will also find the PowerPoint deck. I've already posted it. And we will also post this recording on that page as soon as it's ready. Next week's webinar, I think that's going to be a really enjoyable one as well. Next week's webinar is on using Epub, folks with learning disorders and dyslexia using Epub and the benefits to them. But let's get on to today's webinar, which is Epub 101, talking about the basics and the origins. And let me hand it over to our wonderful presenters, who I'm so grateful they took the time to do this for us, George Kirscher and Richard Orm. So I'll let them introduce themselves. Thanks, everybody.
Hi, my name is George Kirscher. I'm Chief Innovations Officer with the DAISY Consortium and also Senior Officer of Global Literacy with Benetech. Richard?
And hello, folks. My name is Richard Orm. I'm Chief Executive at the DAISY Consortium. For those that don't know, DAISY is an international non-profit organisation focused on ending the problem of access to published materials for people with all sorts of different print disabilities. We're delighted to join you on this webinar.
And moving to our first slide, Epub has become a very popular format for academic publishing throughout the world. And we want to make sure that people in education, whether professors, DSO, officers, or librarians, everybody in the academic space know what this Epub is all about. Going to the next slide. So the whole goal of this is to have born accessible content, which is accessible right out of the box from the publisher. It can be accessible to everybody. We're talking about both web-based publishing and offline reading in Epub. And Epub can be displayed through a web browser, or there are apps available for it. Also, any kind of publishing that's done on the web should be accessible. So everybody needs to read. People without disabilities, people who just need a little bit bigger font, people who are blind and use a screen reader, people with low vision, and people with dyslexia and learning disabilities. All of these folks need to be served by a born accessible product. Next slide. So the publishing industry has embraced EPUB 3. 80% of new titles, at least in the first 2 years, are in Epub. And older publications, backlists, when they come up for reissuing, are being moved into Epub. So the publishers have a digital-first publishing system that allows them to print directly to printers. So many times today, there's no need to go to a PDF. A PDF doesn't exist. And of course, from those XML repositories, they produce directly the EPUB version. Next slide.
So that's over to me. And in this webinar, we've got plenty of information to share with you all about where EPUB came from, the standards on which it's based, how you can search for accessible EPUBs. But early on, we wanted to show you what the experience is like for students with print disabilities and show off the accessibility features of Epub for students with different reading disabilities. So we've pre-recorded this part of the webinar because it makes the captioning a lot easier, and we've been able to highlight certain pieces on the screen. And we'll start that demo now. When thinking about digital books and the diverse requirements of people with different print disabilities, we can consider navigation, reading with a screen reader, visual adjustments, and read aloud. Here, we'll review what the EPUB format offers in each of these areas of accessibility. We know that providing excellent navigation in digital books is essential for readers with disabilities. Fortunately, the EPUB format excels at this. Let's take a look. We're looking at this ebook on a Windows computer, but the same principles apply whether you're reading on a Mac or on Android or on iOS handheld devices. Of course, I can move through the book, page by page, backwards and forwards. Or I can use the table of contents feature to move straight to a section of the book. If I want to go to the same place as page 102 in the print book, I can jump straight there. And it's probably faster than someone who's got the paper version of the book already open on their desk. We've got a reference here to an endnote, so I can jump straight to it. I can read the reference, and then I can go back to where I was reading in the book. I can set my own bookmarks for places I want to come back to, and I can quickly jump to a place that I've already bookmarked. I can search in the book and go straight to that section. So with the ability to easily move forwards and backwards through the book, or jump to a specific page, to use the table of contents, to follow linked content within the book, to have bookmarks and search, it all makes EPUB a highly navigable experience. For digital books to be accessible, they need to work well with screen readers. On Windows computers, the popular options are JAWS, NVDA, or Narrator. On Apple devices, the built-in screen reader is called VoiceOver, and on Android, it's TalkBack. EPUB books are put together using an open standard based on the web, so it's highly compatible with all of these options. We'll show the principles here of reading an EPUB with a screen reader on Windows. As I explore the books in my library, the screen reader announces the information about each title.
Book covers. Fundamentals of World Regional Geography, Marketing, and Introduction by Understanding Motor Development by David L. Gallahue. Early Childhood Education Today, 14th edition by George S. Morrison.
I'm going to open this book by pressing the Enter key. I can then read through the book using regular screen reader controls for navigating text content.
Page edit. Maslow and Self-Actualization Theory. Banner landmark heading Level 1 Maslow and Self-Actualization Theory. Abraham Maslow, 1890 to 1970, developed a theory of human motivation called self-actualization. His theory is based on the satisfaction of human needs, and he identified self-actualization, or self-fulfillment, as the highest human need.
As expected, the screen reader is speaking the text, but it also told me essential information such as the first item being a heading, and I'll hear when I go into and come out of a list.
List with 5 items. Bullet. Life essentials, such as food and water. Bullet. Safety and security. Bullet. Belonging and love. Bullet. Achievement and prestige. Bullet. Aesthetic needs. Out of list.
This rich experience with a screen reader is because the Epub is built on web technologies. I can use the familiar commands I've learned for surfing the web and enjoy the same advantages such as hearing image descriptions.
Graphic A flowchart shows Maslow's hierarchy of needs and your roles as a teacher.
In addition to alt text, this Epub from Pearson has extended descriptions.
Link figure 5.6 full alternative text.
If I select this link, I'll get a very detailed description of what's in this image.
Early Childhood Education Today document. The following list provides each level of Maslow's hierarchy of needs and the roles of a teacher, from lowest to highest. List bullet. Life essentials, food, water, air. List bullet. Provide snacks in the classroom. Bullet. Work with parents and families to ensure that children are well fed. Bullet. Provide designated water fountain times or have children keep water bottles in the classroom, not paper or styrofoam cups. Out of list. Bullet. Safety and security. Safety.
There's a lot of information in this figure, so I'll stop there and go back to the text. I did this by following the link in the Epub. I don't need to learn how to use new commands for this. If I already know how to use my screen reader on the web, then I can use the same commands in an Epub to move between the headings and links, jump to the next graphic, navigate around a table, and so on. So because Epubs are built on web technology, the compatibility with screen readers means there's a great experience reading the HTML-based content, not just to the text, but to rich information such as headings, lists, tables, and image descriptions. And the use of links provides a familiar navigation model for endnotes and other features. And the superior navigation features of Epub, including the table of contents, page navigation, and search, are also highly valuable to screen reader users. For many years, people with print disabilities have needed to make special versions of books and documents to suit their visual needs. These could have been enlarged photocopies, large print editions, or copying pages onto coloured paper. However, the ability to adjust the visual presentation is designed right into the Epub format. Let's see this in action. So, if I have a book open and the print is too small for me, then I can make it larger. And rather than going off the edge of the display, notice how the text magically adjusts to suit the new layout. This is called reflow. It's one of the killer features of Epub. It means the same file can be read on a laptop with a large screen or on a smartphone held in portrait mode. I can adjust the size of this window and still read the paragraph without having to pan the text back and forth. People with low vision or specific learning differences often need larger text, and in Epub this is really easy to use. Also, colours are important for many readers with print disabilities, and the Epub format allows for flexible selection of text and background colours. This reading app has more than 20 combinations. I'll just switch this back to black on white. Now the choice of font can make a big difference to the reading speed and comprehension for some learning disabilities and for people with some eye conditions, and it's easy to change the font of an Epub to find one that suits you. So, with the ability to change the size of words and images, with magical text reflow, and the facility to choose your own colours and fonts, Epub offers many ways to suit the visual needs of readers with print disabilities. People with low vision will sometimes use text-to-speech to increase their reading speed and reduce eye strain. And research shows that reading both visually and through audio is very helpful to people with specific learning differences such as dyslexia. This is often referred to as read aloud, and we can use this capability in this Epub from Pearson. It's built right into this Epub reader I'm using on Windows. I'll just start it from the toolbar.
Issues of assessment. In early childhood education, Essential questions surround what constitutes appropriate and inappropriate practice and what is best for children and families. Assessment is no exception.
Notice how the visual highlighting emphasizes the current line being spoken and each word as it's being read. Next, I can use the controls to move the read aloud further ahead in the text.
Blurring the line between assessment and teaching. As an early childhood professional, you are constantly multitasking.
I can change the speed of the read aloud
And teaching children. But many believe that the emphasis on assessment leads to teaching to the test. This leads to children knowing how to fill in.
and I could select a different voice.
Many fear that the
emphasis on accountability is creating an educational culture that puts test scores ahead of intellectual growth.
Read aloud works very well in Epub. It complements the visual adjustment capabilities, and the format's designed so that the reading order is always followed correctly. So in these demonstrations, we've used Vital Source Bookshelf and NVDA for the screen reader section. And elsewhere we used Microsoft Edge, and that's the Epub reader that comes out of the box with Windows. Later on in the series, we'll do a deeper dive into a whole range of different reading systems. But for the moment, I'll hand back to George to tell us about the origins of Epub.
Thank you. Around the turn of the century, in the early 2000s, there was a range of organization types that came together. It was certainly tech companies involved, publishers were involved, educators, and the disability community were developing the standards around digital publishing, and Epub emerged as the format. And the different groups had different requirements going in. Publishers wanted to have a single file format that they could distribute through all of their distribution channels. A single file that would go out to Apple and Google and Vital Source and Amazon and everywhere. The tech companies wanted a consistent mechanism for delivering content to consumers. And people with disabilities had a wide range of requirements. People who were blind wanted to use their screen readers. People with low vision wanted to be able to magnify. And people with learning disabilities and dyslexia wanted to see that read aloud function we just had demonstrated. So next slide. So the Epub standard is based on W3C standards. Actually, if you rename an Epub to .zip, you can unzip it and see that there's HTML, XHTML files there, CSS, images, the navigation file. All of this is based on W3C standards. Next slide. So in addition, there is the accessibility, Epub accessibility, conformance and discovery specification. This is a standard that was approved in 2017, and it's maintained along with the Epub standard within the W3C in a community group. So this, the accessibility standard establishes the baseline, and it references WCAG, which we all know from the web, and it adds some specific features associated with a digital book. And the publisher can make conformance claims as part of the metadata that's part of the specification. Accessibility metadata is very important in the accessibility standard. And the publishing industry has embraced the accessibility specification. It's just been terrific to see them do that. Moving on. So there's a lot of features that we can talk about. It can conform to WCAG at A or AA, and I would recommend AA in the United States. Alt text for images, extended description, which are longer descriptions if it's too big to fit inside alt text. When when a print version of the book exists, then we require that the page navigation be present so that the page number in the digital book corresponds to the page number in the print book. So when you turn to page 55, you're at the same place in the print book. And the accessibility metadata is exposed and transparent to user. Certified as accessible is another one of the metadata things, features that you can identify the third party that verified the accessibility of this publication. Moving on. So checking the accessibility, the DAISY Consortium has released open source tool, the accessibility checker for Epub. It's free, open source, and has been integrated into the publishing workflows so that they can check the accessibility of their Epub before they release it into the market. It works on all versions of Epub, and it checks the whole title for accessibility. And there's many things that can be checked automatically, and there are things that need to be checked manually. And in the accessibility report that's generated, we provide data visualizations of things like the images, the metadata, the whole structure of the book so that it's properly nested headings and so on. So Global Certified Accessible is an initiative that is very interesting. Benetech in the United States is one of the driving forces around this global certification. It's the first certification initiative in digital publishing. It informs the users, librarians, anybody who's purchasing a title about the accessibility of this publication. And you want to be able to know about the accessibility of the product before you purchase it or borrow it from a library. So it's a great initiative from Benetech. And over to you, Richard.
So we know that EPUBs, actually people say that even an EPUB that is not perfect is so much easier to use with assistive technology than other file formats. But what we really want to be able to do is to discover those accessible publications. And by this we mean something where the accessibility metadata is exposed before you buy it or borrow the book from a digital library. And we want it to be easy to understand and maybe might include terminology such as screen reader friendly to give a summary of the accessibility features, and also importantly indicate which conformance standards are adopted by that particular title. So whether it conforms to WCAG single A or double A, for example, as George mentioned. And it could even be that that title is certified by a third party also, such as Benetech. And we want this kind of discoverability to be available in catalogs and in library systems. I'm going to show you now a link to the VitalSource store, and it's going to be to the same title that I demonstrated to you earlier using Edge and on VitalSource. If I click on the link here, this takes me to the VitalSource website. And this is Early Childhood Today. It's the catalog entry. It gives me information about the ISBN. But here under textbook features, it tells me that this book is accessible. It tells me that it's reflowable, it can be read offline, has study tools. If I want to know more about the accessibility, I can click on this feature here, and it gives me the accessibility summary. And it tells me that it has accessibility features such as long description, the display can be transformed, there's alternative text, the text can be resized and so on. There's a great initiative going on at the moment to really kind of figure out what's the best way to present this accessibility feature, but it's super to see VitalSource first out the gate exposing this accessibility information so that you as college and university staff and students can check the accessibility of a title before you buy or borrow that title. We've talked a lot about EPUB being a format that's used by the publishing industry, but of course a university student or college student will not only get published materials but those that have been produced within the faculty. And so it's great to share with you that faculty can also create EPUBs themselves using common word processors. The ability to create EPUB, well, that's built right into Google Docs and Apple Pages. We've got some great resources, which maybe we'll post on the resources page, that explain how this can be done. At the core, whatever word processing system you're using, you need to make sure that you're producing an accessible word processing document with proper structure, using headings and providing the image descriptions, for example. But it's really easy to produce EPUB out of Google Docs and Pages. And we're working on an add-in to make it really easy to produce valid and accessible EPUB straight out of Word. In the demonstrations, I showed you the reading experience within Epub, but Epub reading apps do vary in the different facilities they offer. Some might, for example, include a dyslexia-friendly font. Others might have a wider range of color choices. There's lots of choice of apps to read different EPUBs. Some of them, though, if you've purchased the title from a specific vendor, you need to be using the EPUB reading app for that specific vendor. So maybe before you choose who your vendor is, you need to understand the accessibility features offered on the reading platforms. There are generic EPUB reading apps, and Edge on Windows 10 is one of those. And there are specialist accessibility apps like Kurzweil, Easy Reader, Voice Stream Reader, and so on. Now we'll do a deeper dive into these different experiences and the pros and cons of reading EPUB on these apps later on in the series. You'll see that advertised. But it's important to understand that the experience of reading any digital content is a combination of the app and the content and the assistive technology that you're using. So to help make that easier to understand, we've done reviews together with a great group of around 60 volunteers around the world who do tests of these different combinations. And we publish the test results up on a website. I'm going to click that link now. This is the Inclusive Publishing website. It's an initiative of the DAISY Consortium. It talks about our reviews of reading systems. It talks about the detail of the protocol that we use for that. But there's also here under the subheading results, a link to summaries of the current test results. Here you'll see roundups of reading apps such as Kindle, digital editions, Edge, iBooks, and so on. And there's links through to the detailed test results. And indeed, if you want to get stuck into doing testing yourselves, the testing is an open process. The test books are open. Come and join us. So an important message around reading apps, but at this stage, I'll hand over and back to George to conclude with the takeaways.
So emphasizing that accessible digital publishing is here courtesy of Epub 3. It was developed in partnerships with the publishing industry, the tech companies, and disability organizations. There are W3C standards around Epub 3 and tools like ACE that help you produce and verify that the publications are accessible. There's a wide range of reading apps that are tailored for some that work for everybody and some that are specialized and work better for a particular disability group. And we have coming up different sessions on for different disability groups. I know I'm going to be doing one with screen readers. I think it's April 30th. And there's one for low vision and one for dyslexic and learning disabilities. I think there's a total of 11 in the series. And with that, we thank you for attending this session, and I think Dawn is going to come back to us now.
Yes, excellent timing. Okay, so we've got 18 questions so far. Some of them can be combined, but I'm just going to start from the top and go down. And so again, here on the slide, you have the link for the bit.ly/epub-atn PowerPoint deck. Oh, and that really great website that Richard just showed on inclusive publishing that overviews all of the different reading systems and how they work with EPUB. That's in the resources section of that website. Okay, so first question. For students who are directed to page numbers for a reading, is there a way to view or reference the page number in an EPUB book?
So I showed this in the demonstration. In that title that was provided to us by Pearson for demonstration purposes, just like so many good EPUBs that are produced these days, it has page navigation in there. And the reading app, I was using Edge, I could jump straight to page 102, I think it was, by doing Control G, and that took me to page 102. So it took me straight there. The way that you do this will depend on the different reading apps. So if you're using an iPhone, for example, and you're using VoiceOver, or maybe if you're using a different reading app, there'll be a different mechanism for doing that. Sometimes people don't just want to jump to a page, they want to find out which page they're on. And so if I was using Edge, for example, when I did that Control G, it would tell me which page I'm on because it takes the focus there. The ability of the reading app to support the page navigation is one of the tests we do in our reading systems evaluations, and we make that an essential criteria. So we call it out if page navigation is not supported on a particular EPUB reading system. We know how important it is in the education field.
So
right.
that's absolutely correct. It's the reading app that provides the information about where they are. Normally, the publisher would not put something like page 55 in the digital version. The link to that spot in the book is provided, but you don't see it as actual content in the page normally.
Just to add a tiny bit more to this, it has been noted to us by publishers that now we're beginning to see publications where there isn't a print version of it, and therefore there isn't a page numbering system for it. And there's discussion within the standards world about whether there should be some kind of phantom page numbering, because that's what people are used to doing and citing and so on.
And in those types of books, the normal navigation is through the structured table of contents. So a hierarchy of chapters, sections, subsections, and so on.
Great, thank you. Off the top of your head, converting the font in an EPUB to dyslexia font, is that possible in Edge and any other apps that you can think of that open EPUB?
The fonts available in Edge, that does not include a dyslexia font. There's a range of serif and sans serif fonts in there. Again, we note where people do include a dyslexia-friendly font, people will know there's some controversy and different views about whether specifically a dyslexia font is something that's required. What we promote is choice, and including a dyslexia-friendly font we would see as best practice. Mm-hmm. So that's a function of the reading app, which fonts it offers to you.
And had a handful of questions about Kurzweil, and of course I'll note that the very next session will be going over in more detail about Kurzweil, but the question is that can this EPUB be used with reader programs like Kurzweil? And, you know, in short, I think we all agree the answer is yes.
Yep. So as you say, there'll be a deeper dive into this in that particular webinar, and it may be that later on in the series as well, we do a very specific one on individual reading apps. So a whole webinar on using Epub with a specific reading app, and it seems like Kurzweil is certainly a candidate for that. But yeah, Epub is one of the supported formats of Kurzweil. And then once you've got that loaded into Kurzweil, then you can use the Kurzweil features that you know and love.
And I'll add that Richard and I were at CSUN and meeting with folks, including those from Kurzweil, about how we can help with our reading testing and improve their product in its support for Epub. So we've got a good relationship with them, and I think we will be seeing improvements as time goes on.
All right, and then Will asks, are you able to navigate using just the keyboard in the Epub navigation panels? Now, this was at 210, so I'm not sure which app was playing at 210 in your video. Any comment on that? Or Will, if you'd like to, re-ask the question, we can answer it more specifically.
I'm blind, and I just use the keyboard. I never mess around with the mouse. So by using arrow keys and tabs, the normal functions that I do navigating a web page is what I use in an Epub. Same things.
Okay. How are Epubs accessed? Online or in a DRM environment?
So they're accessed online, they're accessed offline, and they can be accessed offline either in DRM or they could be open. So EBSCO, for example, is a huge library system which has many 650,000 ebooks, I think, and something like coming towards 300,000 of those titles, I believe, are without DRM, and some of them are with DRM. The DRM doesn't make the title inaccessible, but what it does is it limits your choice of reading app. So if you have an unprotected or unrestricted Epub, then you could open it in your choice of reading app, be that Kurzweil, Easy Reader, Edge, iBooks, the list goes on. But if it's locked, then, for example, in the case of EBSCO and several other systems, that's locked with the Adobe solution, and you have to use digital editions for that approach. What the publishers and platforms say is if they've gone to the trouble of making an accessible Epub and somehow the DRM is preventing you having good access to it, then that's not a situation they're happy to live with. So they'd love to learn about that, and in many cases will provide an unprotected Epub for a student's use. So then you have the choice of Epub.
And Dawn, I don't know if you are having publishers providing unprotected Epub where they've got an environment, like EBSCO, that that the digital editions is not. I have a hard time using it.
We've got publishers providing unlocked, just standalone Epub files on Access Text. Definitely. And I have not honestly dealt with EBSCO or Adobe Edition, so I can't answer that part of it. Right.
But the principle goes, if it's a DRM is causing you problems, then in my experience, there's a policy in place or a way of them being able to acquire the unlocked Epub. That could be through Access Text Network in the States, through Bookshare, or direct request to the platform or to the publisher. Your mileage will vary according to which system you're using. Epub is in so many places, it's hard to give a single answer because you could be on a library system and doing many things.
All right. Next question. Can you highlight info and can you take notes when using an Epub file? And I know that sort of delves into which app you're using, but if there's any comment you'd like to make about that, feel free.
So Epub apps are reading apps. They're for reading and studying with that content. So typically they would give you the ability to highlight and to add comments and to copy short bits of text out of the Epub you're reading. So yeah, highlighting, bookmarking I just touched on that a little bit in my demos. These are typical features to include in a reading app.
And the ones that are focused on education have those kinds of features. Some of the apps that are just for leisure reading may not have that function. So, but in higher ed, the ones used in education traditionally have that kind of functionality. And we test it in our fundamental test book with the reading apps.
Excellent. All right, and again, you know, the next 3 sessions, and they're going to be 1 week apart. So, and they're going to be on Tuesdays, same time. They are going to dive deep into all of these different reading apps and how they're used and for who. So it's going to get a lot more detailed for you with your questions. But do students need an internet connection to be able to access their EPUB files?
You can deliver an EPUB in a variety of ways. Most people will download it, but yeah, you could take an EPUB, put it on a flash drive, and put it on your computer. And this brings in side loading, where many of the applications allowed you to side load it. And you know, what I do a lot is put it in my Dropbox folder, and then I can open it in anything, you know, lots of different things that access my Dropbox. Edge, iBooks, all kinds of different things. But you don't have to have a live internet connection to be reading unless it's from a web service. So Red Shelf is strictly reading on the web, so you have to have an internet connection there, and Vital Sources web reader, but most of them allow you to download and have your collection essentially on your device.
And I think some of the browser delivered reading services may these days also allow you to read portions of your title offline, actually. So you can take a bit of it offline.
Great. All right. Can Adobe Acrobat /Reader open EPUB file extension? I'll give you guys a break as I can do this one. No, it cannot. So Adobe Acrobat and/or Reader, they were only created by Adobe for opening PDF files. And so PDF is a file extension, EPUB is a file extension. So EPUB cannot be opened in Adobe Acrobat or Reader, but again, over the next 3 sessions, you'll get to see lots of different ways that you can open an EPUB other than the Acrobat that you're used to. And Richard and George, if you have anything to add to that, feel free.
Well, just to say that Adobe's reader for EPUB is called Digital Editions. There are versions of it across the different platforms. As George said, with folk using certain assistive technology combinations, people are finding it unstable and it's not very feature rich. So it doesn't meet everyone's needs by any stretch. So that's where people sometimes need to break out and get an unprotected version. But Adobe do have cross-platform reading solution in Digital Editions.
Thank you. All right, annotating. Okay, this person works with a couple students who say annotating is very important to their studies, and they request a Word document because of this, and also because they are using a screen reader. Is annotating available in EPUB?
Yes. So the Vital Source is a good example where you create your annotations you open the book, you create your annotations, they're associated with a spot in the book, and you can go look at your annotations later. Also, the Vital Source bookshelf allows the syncing of those annotations across platforms. So you could be on your Windows machine and doing annotations, and those annotations get moved up to the cloud, and you could use them on your iPhone or you could view it in the web version of that book. So that's kind of a cool feature. But yeah, screen readers work with, it doesn't change the book, it adds the annotation on top of the book.
Excellent. All right. Let's see. What okay, what programs can be used for EPUBs with all of these features enabled other than Edge? So again, it's one of those that points to future sessions, and I'm not sure what was playing when she wrote that, but if there's anything you'd like to comment about that, feel free.
If you go to inclusivepublishing.org/reading, we have the review of, I don't know, 15 or 20 different popular reading applications on different platforms and with different access technology. So there's a slew of them.
Great. And how do you access EPUB files on a PC computer? And maybe we can narrow that down because, of course, on Windows 10, it's really easy to access an EPUB. You just double click on it and Edge opens. But on Windows 7, it's a little bit of a different story. Any thoughts on that?
We've mentioned it a few times, the VitalSource Windows app, that's free to download. You could download that, use that on Windows 7 and open up your EPUB right there within that program.
Okay.
You could use digital editions as well if that met your needs. So there are choices there.
And you could use Kurzweil, and I'm sure that there's more that they're going to get into in the next few sessions. All right.
And you can, this is where you sideload. If you've got an EPUB and you open VitalSource, you can paste the EPUB into one of your folders in VitalSource and read it there. Then it'll show up all the time.
Okay. Okay, so the next question or slash comment, I think it was during the video, there may have been multiple references to this EPUB reader, and they were wondering what EPUB readers is that, and I know you've covered it was NVDA reading Edge, right?
So the screen reader demo I did with VitalSource Bookshelf on Windows. And I was the screen reader I was using was NVDA. I tried to focus my demos on software that people don't have to pay to download and you can just go and get. So VitalSource Bookshelf version 7, I think it is, with NVDA, and then the rest of the navigation, the visual adjustments, and the read aloud, I used Edge on, in the hope and expectation that lots of folk who have Windows are on Windows 10 and it's right there already. You don't need to go and download something. But so those were the two systems I was demonstrating.
Thank you. And so he goes on to say, and this is something I've heard a bit, so the difficulties many of our students have is the confusion between the format, the reader application, and the text-to-speech technology. Not all readers are compatible with screen readers. Not all students use screen readers, and many use other text-to-speech tools like Natural Reader, Captive Voice, etc. How can we find a comprehensive list of the reader / text-to-speech combinations that work for reading EPUB? And just to reiterate, if you click on the Answer tab on this Q&A, one of the last things I answered included that inclusivepublishing.org link that has a really great rundown of the different apps.
And I would also add that if you visit epubtest.org, that's where the technical work is being conducted, evaluating the various EPUB reading apps. And so the fundamental test book, which is available from epubtest.org, we use that and can test it with any EPUB reader and with a whole range of assistive technology. And we've not tested everything, but we've tested quite a bit. And if there is combinations that you would like us to work on and test, let us know, and we'll give it a go. But better yet, join us and do the testing with us, and we'll report those results.
Great.
That was a great question, and I hope we answered it. And with those resources that we have published, that helps address that question. But if there's something we're missing, we haven't covered something off, and we're still leaving people unclear about which apps to use or where the gaps are, then we'd love to hear from you so we can address those questions.
And what would be the best way for them to submit that feedback?
We hadn't prepared for that question.
I'm sorry.
Uh,
Is there like a link on inclusive? Could they click on the contact us link on inclusivepublishing.org where that information is published?
What about it through the Access Text Network, Dawn? Do you have any
Absolutely.
kind of forum or something like that in there? Because it feels like that's on the Inclusive Publishing website, we have publishers and vendors. It's a very broad
Sure.
group, whereas this feels to me like a defined community. I'm sure still diverse, but the questions will be specific to these things. So
Absolutely.
is there
Yeah.
a way that do you have a way of people being able to submit questions or ask queries, and then we can maybe build up an FAQ or something like that?
Certainly, certainly. So, of course, yes, anybody can submit any comments that they have or questions that they have. You can find us, all of our contact information is on our website, accesstext.org, and just click on that contact tab, and that will give you our email and online contact us form. Our email address is membership@accesstext.org. So yeah, I'd be happy to field those and distribute and then document. That would be wonderful. Sorry to catch y'all off guard.
Well, there's a lot of different areas where work is taking place. Certainly in the community group of W3C and Epub, there's the Epub 3 community group where the standard is maintained and developed. Epub 3.2, which is a harmonization of all the versions of Epub 3, is coming out in the next month. We have a working group, Epub in higher education. It's got about 35, 40 people in it, including the three of us and many, many others. And it includes the tech companies and the publishers and DSO folks. We did that group put together a whole bunch of sessions for accessing higher ground last year, and end of this week is the first round of call for proposals for ATN for this coming November. But there's many different areas where work is taking place. So, and people can always send me an email if they wish. My email is kerscher@montana.com, KERSCHER@montana.com. But because I do put my email address out there, I do have a full inbox.
I think you just added to it there, George.
I know, I did.
I know, you sure did. Okay, so we have 5 minutes left. We've answered 20 questions. There's 26 left. Let me see if I can find some highlights. So there was one question about Braille, students using Braille and being able to access EPUBs. Now, I'm not quite sure if they meant like if you get an EPUB file, then how can you go forward and convert that into Braille, or if students using Braille could just use that EPUB straight up. So if there's any key point that you want to talk about there, then I'll find another good question for you.
Well, refreshable Braille is typically how a person would use Braille to access the EPUB. And we test at epubtest.org. We do have some tests with refreshable Braille, and normally the screen reader works in conjunction with a refreshable Braille display to essentially provide the information on the refreshable Braille screen that is being spoken. So that's dovetails with a screen reader. And Richard, one of the new dedicated devices.
Yeah, the HumanWare Braille Note Touch is an Android-based solution, and this ships now as standard with EPUB reading capability. So you could take the EPUB that I was demonstrating and read that on that Braille display. And they've worked really hard on things like the navigation within that, so it becomes a really efficient way of being able to navigate around a complex title, jump to a page, and so on. I hear that's a super experience, although I haven't yet done the evaluation with that. So that's the HumanWare Braille Note Touch, and that comes with actually a version of the Easy Reader app specifically optimized for Braille. That's apparently shipping as standard now for products in North America, and I believe if you update your device, it will get that app as well.
And some of the specialist reading apps, Easy Reader for iOS and Android, are very, very good about providing that Braille access.
All right. Are all textbooks available in EPUB format? If not, how can you convert other types of files to EPUB?
Not all titles are available in EPUB. There's a long history of materials that are in PDF form. And when the publisher brings them up to reissue it, or if it's a really popular title, then they will reissue it with in an EPUB version. And Richard, do you want to answer the other part of that question?
So the converting to an EPUB from any kind of Frankenstein format, that feels like something for a specialist unit that is used to doing digitization and then the production of EPUB. So folk need to learn some new workflow techniques for that. Maybe they do scanning at the moment, and EPUB is another format that they can produce in addition to maybe Word or whatever they're doing for their students at the moment. So that's not something that a consumer would typically be able to take a digital textbook that's in another format and just create an EPUB from it.
You have to pay a lot of attention to heading structure, to page numbers, to correct reading order, alt text. There's a lot that needs to be done in order to ensure a born accessible publication. And this is why the accessibility checker for EPUB is so important, and why the global certified accessible service that Benetech is providing is really great, because they work with the publisher to ensure they're doing everything correctly until their workflow always produces born accessible content. That's the whole point of this certification process.
But if you're in an alt format department of a university that's used to creating accessible versions from inaccessible versions, there are tools and techniques and workflows to help you create EPUB. So maybe, again, that's a possible future webinar. Dawn, I also see that there are questions here about Mac use. Be ashamed to finish
Go for it.
before. So there are EPUB readers available on the platforms like Windows 10, on Apple Mac, on iOS and Android, and they all are out of the box. So on iOS and on Mac, you have an EPUB reader already as part of the operating system called Books, used to be called iBooks. iBooks, their whole ebook system is all based on EPUB and has been for many, many years. They were early adopters, Apple, of EPUB. So you could take an EPUB and load it within the Books app on your Mac, or you could go and get another Mac-based reading app if that doesn't have the features that you like. So, for example, VitalSource Bookshelf is one. So there are options for the Mac and for Android and iOS too.
And what is the default on Android?
That's Playbooks. That's Google's bookstore is called Playbooks, and they have a book reader on there, and their native format is Epub.
Okay, so we are at 3:01 p.m. and I want to be respectful of people's time. So there are 22 questions that we have not had time to answer. Perhaps if the people who have not had their questions answered could go in and post their email address to the questions and answers if they would like for us to email them with an answer. I don't know if that's the best way to do it, but it's the one that popped in my head first. And while they are doing that, this was an interesting question. Is there a listserv for disability service offices willing to make the transition to Epub? And of course, I'm not aware of one, but I wonder about that as an idea of you know, a listserv talking about Epub and everything focused on Epub, asking questions, sharing information about apps with one another.
I have not seen one. I do track the ATN and AHEAD and a couple other higher education listservs, and I will post there when a question is asked about Epub, or if somebody is saying something that is just a little off kilter. That's a good question. I know we're planning a 2-day workshop before ATN this year all around Epub and how to make Epub and things like that. But I don't know of a list devoted to it in higher ed.
Yeah, and you were mentioning Accessing Higher Ground, AHG, that you're doing that for?
Yes, right.
Okay.
2-day workshop just before. We haven't
Excellent.
written it up yet, but that's what the afternoon is for.
All right. Okay, well, I've just gotten one email address so far, but anybody who needs to hop off, that's fine.
Yes, and Dawn,
Okay.
and those questions, the ones that have been asked and
Yeah.
answered, and ones we haven't managed to answer, I think the idea of maybe pulling these together into an FAQ and
Perfect.
popping that up on the resource is a good way to address that.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Richard. Okay. All right. So I think we should wrap it up. It's 3:04. Thank you guys for your engagement and for being interested in learning about this. And George and Richard, thank you so much for your time and for your expertise in this topic. Really appreciate you guys.
It's a
You're
pleasure
welcome.
being here, and thank you for having us.
Yeah, great being here.
Wonderful. All right, everyone have a great day. Thank you.